Hello there. Welcome to this episode of Force Ghost Conversations. This is your host, Anthony King. And in this special episode, I am joined by Patrick Cotnoir, co host, producer, and talent booker for the George Lucas Talk Show, to discuss the documentary I'm George Lucas, a Connor Ratliff Story. If you're a fan of the podcast and would like to consider pledging your support, there'll be a link in the episode description for you to check out the various tiers offered. Also, please be sure to check out our TeePublic store to buy some Force Ghost Conversations merchandise. And without further ado, it's time to gather around the campfire for some Force Ghost Conversations. All right, everybody, welcome back to Force Ghost Conversations. And we are here for a really special treat today. I am so thrilled to have on the show Patrick Cotnoir, who is here to talk all things about the George Lucas Talk Show, his journey with Star Wars, and of course the new documentary that's come out called I'm George Lucas, a Connor Ratliff Story, which is now available on video on demand. Just go to imgeorgelucas.com. Of course, I will have a link in the episode description where you can check it out, where you can rent it, buy it, watch it, listen to it. Of course, you do all that when you engage with a form of media. So, that is kind of the impetus for this conversation here, is to celebrate that it is now out on video on demand. So I hope that a lot of you get to check it out there. We don't get into a whole lot of, we do dabble in not. Let me rephrase that there. We don't really get into full spoilers on the show because I wanted to keep it that way intentionally so that you as the viewer can go out and check it for yourself, right? But we do, touch upon things that are referenced in the documentary or reference certain scenes and all that stuff. But in terms of the big meat and the weight behind it all, that is, of course, left for your viewing pleasure within the documentary itself. But I gotta say, I've seen it now twice. I loved it. I loved it the first time. I loved it so much that I was like, going right back to the beginning, and I'm watching this again from start to finish. It's excellent. There's a lot of heart. It believes in itself. There's lots of humor, of course, too, and it just showcases the wonderful concept behind you. If you have an idea and you put the effort and work in behind it and believe in yourself, and you can just about make anything happen. And the documentary kind of showcases the George Lucas Talk Show, which is kind of the brainchild of comedian Connor Ratliff, who portrays George Lucas. And we get into the whole what the why behind George Lucas, and the meaning behind that in our conversation with Patrick, of course. But it kind of showcases this 2019 era where the show has been going on for 5 years, and now we're even 5 years beyond that at this point too. So the show's gone through several iterations, and of course that is touched upon as well in our conversation as well. So, Patrick was a wonderful guest. We're so thrilled to have him on the show to talk about the documentary. He's done some work with Marvel, the Chris Gethard Show, and of course he is a co-host, producer, talent booker for the George Lucas Talk Show. So he's got hands in just about every pocket. He's wearing every hat you can imagine to put the show on and all that stuff, and just being a wonderful person logistically behind the scenes putting it together. So he talks about that as well in our conversation here too. I've done a lot of preambling about the show and the documentary already to this point, and I think it's time to get into the conversation with Patrick here. So just on the other side of this short break, we'll be back with our conversation with Patrick Cotnoir. Stay tuned, folks. All right, everybody, welcome back to a special installment of Force Ghost Conversations. I hope that you maybe have heard about the George Lucas Talk Show in your rumblings in the Star Wars community on perhaps Twitter or Twitch, or maybe you've just been a part of the larger comedy fandom over the last couple of years. But we are here today to talk about a brand new documentary that has come out called I'm George Lucas, a Connor Ratliff Story. And this story goes right into the kind of the genesis of the George Lucas Talk Show, kind of talks about the whole story, about the making of it, the behind the scenes look and all that, and just kind of profiles Connor as a character as he becomes George Lucas through this endeavor. But to get into all this conversation, we have a member of the George Lucas Talk Show team with us to break down the documentary, to talk about his role in said project. We are here, of course, joined by the wonderful Patrick Cotnoir, who is a producer and talent booker for the George Lucas Talk Show. Patrick, how are you doing? And welcome to Force Ghost Conversations.
I'm so good, Anthony. Thank you so much for having me. Psyched to be here.
It's our pleasure to have you. And before we get into talking about the George Lucas Talk Show and the documentary, of course, I want to get a kind of, foundation for your overall Star Wars fandom. What are your earliest memories of Star Wars? And at
Yeah,
what point did you kind of say to yourself, like, I am a fan now of this galaxy far,
sure.
far away?
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying to figure out recently when was the first time that I saw them, and genuinely, the first time I remember seeing them was the special editions.
Love it.
Um, I assume I saw them before then, but I don't remember it specifically. But I remember like going to the theaters, going to the Taco Bells after, getting all the toys, doing the full gamut of special edition, excitement. But my aunt was a big Star Wars person and she was growing up when the original trilogy was coming out.
Hmm.
And when she left my grandparents' house, she like left a bunch of books and toys and stuff at my grandparents' house. So when
Yeah.
I was a child, like they were ever present, they were always around.
Hmm.
It was a lot of Star Wars and Muppet stuff. Those were like the two things that she left that like were just like huge for me as a child and are still big parts of my life now. But that's probably the earliest memory is like going to see them, month to month as they were coming out and being excited for the movie, but also being excited that we were gonna get those. They're not even churros. What are they? The little
Yeah.
chip things that they used to have at Taco Bell? I
Oh my
love
God.
those. Um, so yeah, that was the earliest memory. And I feel like the moment when it really like clicked in beyond just seeing the movies was it must have been the next year when a lot of the Power of the Force figures came out.
Hmm.
Um, I got a ton of them for Easter the next year.
You lucky.
I just I was very lucky. And I remember just getting a gigantic box, like a huge, huge box, and just opening them up and it was like, oh, it's entirely full of action figures. And there's so many during COVID, I was like scanning all of my parents' photos and like digitizing all the videos and stuff.
Hmm.
And there's so many funny pictures and videos of me like opening up this box. And there's one that I really love where I'm so excited to get Grand Moff Tarkin. And I
Yeah.
have to imagine like I'm the only kid who's like psyched to get that Peter Cushing action figure,
Oh,
you
oh.
know?
I have a feeling you weren't the only one, but
Probably not,
this
but
is a gem of a memory right there that
for
like you're
sure
able to
seeing yeah.
like you captured the moment perfectly of like the resurgence of Star Wars that you're so like
Yeah.
enthused and excited by a Peter Cushing action figure.
I know, just like seeing the joy in my eyes for that figure specifically is how I'm like, "Oh, I was fully on board." Like I was all in because it wasn't, a cool alien or Han Solo or whatever. It was Peter Cushing, which in retrospect rules. I'm really proud of,
Absolutely.
of
Uh, it's like a crown
7-year-old
jewel of a
Patrick or
collection now
whatever.
if someone has one.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh man, that
Yeah, so that
rocks.
was that's the earliest thing that I remember of when it was like, "Oh, okay, I'm all in," you know?
I love it. I love it. The special, I mean, love them or hate them, the special
Yeah.
editions was a resurgent time for Star Wars, and for a lot of people, it was there for like it sounds like for you, it was your
Yeah,
first cognitive memory of Star Wars. Like you're saying, like it was everywhere. It's a part of popular culture. It's permeated everything. Everyone knows like the story of Star Wars to some degree, or you may get some minor details here wrong, but like it's a part of everything, especially because now it's commercialized to such a degree that it is everywhere.
for
But
sure.
like,
And I'm
oh, go ahead.
I'm no, I was gonna say I'm pro special edition still to this day. I think there's a few things that I'm like obviously would love if they here's my take on it. And I've said this before. I would be okay if they did another special edition. Like
Oh my
go in
gosh,
and
you and I are on the same
you
page
know,
here. I love it.
just like you fix the Ronto up, make the Ronto look great, fix Jabba up, make him look
Hmm.
great. Like stuff like that, I think would make it fantastic. And even going down to like, I'm glad that Ian McDermott is in Empire Strikes Back now, but I truly despise that he looks like he does in Revenge of the Sith. And I'm like, just go in and fix him. You did it for Kenobi, where he's like
Yeah.
got the makeup on where you're like, oh, this looks legit. This looks like the Return of the Jedi stuff. just go in and fix it. And
Just keep updating. Yeah.
that's my feeling. As long as they're still left available for people, like, I don't care, you know?
Oh my gosh.
Uh,
I'm 100% behind this take.
Great. I love
This
it.
is fantastic. We're in
That's
the
good
same
because
good company here.
that's normally a spicy take. I feel like that's a hot one normally, so I'm happy
Oh
that
my
you're on
gosh,
board with it.
we are definitely on the same page when it comes to that one. Like when I found out that McClunky was in A New Hope, that there was another change to it, I said, just give it to me, man. If
Gimme,
there,
gimme, gimme.
what other Easter eggs does George have lying around for us?
I find McClunky to be truly the funniest thing possible from a George perspective, because I was already like obviously working on this show at that point.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
George is already like in my brain being like or at least our version of George. And just the fact that they did that for the 3D re-release of New Hope, which never
never
happened,
saw
you
light of
know?
day. Yeah.
No, and it was what, 7 years before it showed up on Disney Plus that they were
Hmm.
working on that? 8 years, something like that. So the fact that that was sitting there like a ticking time bomb and they were like, "We know this is here. We know we can't change it. When is the time for us to unleash it?" And the fact that it was Disney Plus Day and they thought they could maybe bury it under the, Mando season 1 coming out, makes me laugh so much.
Absolutely. It was like George's like final going away present for like those that were left behind at Lucasfilm to be like, yeah, you're so right. The launch of Disney Plus Day,
Yes. Yeah.
like everyone's thinking like, okay, it's the Mandalorian has debuted. We've got this
Yeah.
new Jeff Goldblum show.
Yeah.
The hype, every Disney Channel original movie that everybody wants to rewatch again is
Yeah.
now available for the first time on a streaming platform.
It's
McClunky
his
takes the day.
Yes, it's his, Marva Andor. It's his fight the
Yeah,
Empire
yeah.
speech. It's the last thing he leaves with the world saying, "This is my final will and testament, McClunky."
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! And again, like, what else is just sitting in
I
a archive waiting to be unearthed that
I'm so
could
ready.
be it'd be amazing. I wonder if Kathleen Kennedy is also going on her last days in office when she eventually gets to that point. It's gonna be like,
Yeah.
let's McClunky everything.
Let's do it all.
Let's do it
Look,
all.
I mean, the dream is, I read interviews with the guy who directed the beginning, the
Hmm.
Phantom Menace documentary, and
Yes,
he's like, "We shot 600 hours of footage."
I know.
And my dream is like, "Great, give us a 20-hour cut of the beginning." You know what I mean? Like,
Oh, 20 hour. I want all 600.
oh,
Give me every
100%.
second. I want
But
every just odd meeting that they had to sit in.
I'm trying to be realistic,
That's true. That's
and
true.
give us the 20-hour cut, and then we'll work our way up from there. But there's so much stuff in that archive that's just like sitting there, collecting dust on a hard drive somewhere.
Oh.
Would love it. Give me it
And
all.
they're just constantly digitizing it for whatever
Yeah,
format it to this and then save. It's on some
yeah,
cloud somewhere right now.
yeah.
Like those
Now
archivists have
there,
done the work. It's digitized. It's they've transcribed it. You could just like keyword search it in a document
there's the
probably.
heist. Let's make that heist. Forget
Ooh.
fanboys. We don't need the Phantom Menace, movie. Give us the behind the scenes of the stuff. That's what you
Yeah,
need to get.
exactly. Give me the beginning. The
Yes.
the unaltered cut of the beginning. This is great. We're off to a wonderful start here,
I'm
Patrick.
ready. Yeah.
I love knowing your foundation for Star Wars now. I love knowing that we're geeks about the special editions. A wonderful thing about that too is we're both physical media collectors. Every
Mhm.
edition is now a super valuable part of Star Wars history
Yeah.
and understanding the journey of Star Wars. So you know we're all on the same page. It sounds like when it comes to this stuff here. But to talk about what we're here primarily to talk about is
Yes.
the documentary I'm George Lucas, which is now available on video on demand. So anybody that wants to go check it out, perhaps after this conversation, of course, here, or
Mhm.
maybe you pause it, you go rent it or buy it at imgeorgelucas.com, and then you
Yeah.
can come back to this conversation or afterwards too. Both are fine. We'll take both.
Yeah.
Um, it
Watch it
chronicles this.
twice.
Yeah, watch it.
Watch it
I did.
midway. Yeah.
It's
Great.
it's
We
incredible.
love it. Good.
I
I'm
laughed,
so
I
happy to hear
cried.
that.
It was a wonderful journey, and
Oh, that's great.
I truly loved it. I was like, I sat my wife down. I was like, you got to watch this too. This is really
Oh,
great. You're gonna love it. So like we're gonna catch it a third time here soon.
oh, that's
It's
amazing.
really excellent. And it the documentary itself, like I kind of talked about in the preamble, chronicles the story of Connor Ratliff, who's the primary host of the George Lucas Talk Show, George Lucas himself, and it chronicles the kind of the series as it enters its fifth year. So for someone who hasn't seen or even heard of the George Lucas Talk Show, how would you describe the program and what it entails?
Yeah, I mean, this is the $1,000,000 question that we've been working on for 10 years, right? How do you get
Yeah.
this? What's the elevator pitch for
What are we
this
doing here,
show?
guys?
Yeah. The George Lucas talk show is a quote unquote regular talk show that happens to be hosted by George Lucas. George
Love it.
Lucas, played by Connor Ratliff, retired, sold Star Wars to Disney, and in his retirement was a little bored, said, "What do I want to do? I want to start a talk show." That is the reality of our show. It's
It's
co-hosted
beautiful.
by Watto, played by Griffin Newman, who you might know from the Blank Check podcast or The
Hmm.
Tick or Masters of the Universe, so many things. And then I'm their producer slash on-air co-host at this point. It was a stage show at the UCB Theater in New York, which is a very famous improv theater in New York, um, through from 2014 through 2020, and then I don't know if you heard, but there was a global pandemic.
Yeah, a
Everything
little
shut
thing happened.
down. Yeah, and then we became a live streaming show on Twitch in 2020, and that went. It's still going. We're still doing them, but now it's sort of a combination. Now that the world is opened back up, a combination of live shows and live streams.
Yeah.
And we interview real guests as themselves. They might be Star Wars guests. We've had like Ahmed Best on, but they also might be Whoopi Goldberg or Seth Meyers or Weird
Oh.
Al or whoever. Like it's a lot of insane people that you're like, why? I don't understand why you're here. You know. Um, but it's very silly. It's very fun. We all love Star Wars. We all love George, and it is a lot about Star Wars, but it's also kind of an interesting look into the entertainment industry because, like, we like to ask people about weird, obscure projects that they worked on. We like to ask
Yeah.
people, it's not always actors. Sometimes it's writers, directors. We've had,
Hmm.
costume designers, like the whole gamut on. And during COVID, especially when we were doing long live streams, we would have those kinds of people on and like really get into like what that job entails. So we also used it as sort of like a learning tool for a lot of people out there
Yeah.
because George is a filmmaker, so he would be interested in talking to people in the industry.
100%.
And yeah, just like really getting into the nitty gritty of like what it's like to work in this weird world, in this weird industry. And yeah, it's very silly, but it's fun. It's a fun show.
I absolutely love the concept overall. It's just brilliant, and it makes total sense that George, in his retirement, would be the person to be taking up this mantle.
Yes.
And now, not to spoil the documentary a
Yeah.
whole lot, but I know that in one of the scenes, in the earlier scenes where it's showcasing the kind of the talk show itself, Mo Rocca is one of the guests too.
Yeah.
And again, it's talking about like, does anybody need to have any concept of what Star Wars is or know anything about Star Wars in order to be on this talk show? And the answer is no, right? You just answer the questions as you would
Yeah.
any other normal talk show. And it's funny just seeing Mo Rocca in this situation here. And then at the gym this morning, I'm looking up at the TVs that they have, and there he is interviewing somebody. I'm like,
Yeah.
it's full circle.
He's all over the place. He was great. But yeah, I mean, we always tell guests where it's like, have you seen any Star Wars movies? They'll be like, either yes, I've seen them all, whatever,
Yeah.
or I saw one when I was like 7. I don't really remember it, and we're like, great, it doesn't really matter
Yeah. It's a
because
moot point question to begin with.
it's totally. I mean, there's another point in the documentary when I think it's the December 2019 show,
Yeah.
and they're talking to Connor afterwards, and he's like, we didn't talk about the fact that there's a Star Wars movie coming out in like 2 weeks, and it was
I
Rise
know.
of Skywalker.
It's brilliant.
He's like, it's the last movie, and we didn't even talk about it. So the show really has like kind of evolved beyond Star Wars in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, where it's like we all still like talking about it, and obviously, quote unquote, George, will bring a lot of things that the guests say and work it back into talking about himself or talking about Star
Mhm,
Wars or talking
mhm.
about any other George project. But
Yeah,
it's not the
Radioland
be
Murders.
all. Radioland Murders, Howard the Duck, Strange Magic. We
Yeah.
cover them all. We cover them all. But it's not the be all end all of the show, which I think a lot of people assume. We have guests be like, "Oh no, I don't want to come on. I don't like Star Wars at all," and then there's like
Mhm.
no real talking them out of that, even though you're explaining like, well, it's not really about that. Like, it's
Yeah.
just it's the way to get the people in the door, and then
Yeah,
after
it's more
that,
than that. It's grown beyond
yes,
the
yes, we
initial
are
concept
we
pitch,
are
but it's
what
still there.
we've grown beyond. Yes,
Yeah, we are what we've grown beyond.
yes,
Exactly. But also, as Connor would mention later at the in that same point you're referencing about the Rise of Skywalker, is like,
yeah.
I don't think George would care either about this. He's not connected to it at all.
No,
Like,
100%. Yeah.
as he shows up at the premiere, he looks like he's just like being forced to be there to some
Yeah,
degree.
and I don't know if he's seen all those movies and TV shows. He may not have. It doesn't, it's a past part of his life, and I personally do not care if he watches these shows. If he
Yeah,
watches them and likes
doesn't
them,
matter.
great. If he doesn't want to watch them, I don't want him to watch them,
Yeah,
because
no
I'm
one's
sure it's
forcing him to.
very It's like, it's like seeing like an ex with their current significant other, and you're just like,
Yeah.
if I don't need to see that, I don't want to see it, and that's totally fine. So, our shows, we talk about a lot, but we talk about so much other stuff too.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And definitely in Connor's performance, he takes a lot of inspiration from the mannerisms and the
Mhm,
Georgisms, as I like to say on this
mhm.
podcast. And so prior to working on this show, kind of what was your familiarity with the life and the kind of mannerisms of George Lucas himself?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty intimately familiar. I feel like, when
Right.
I
Yeah.
when I like something, I get very obsessed with it.
Okay, great.
And especially when I was a kid, you look at the things that I'm interested now, and it's like, if I'm looking at all the stuff that's around my apartment, it's a lot of Star Wars, it's a lot of Muppets, and it's a lot of like Universal monster stuff. And you're like, okay,
Amazing.
those were like the big three things when I was a
Oh,
kid, you
I
know?
love it. I love it.
So, they're still very much a big part of my life. And when I was a kid, you're reading all these books, you're getting everything you can from the library. It was like early days of like home internet stuff. So that was what I was looking up. That was what I was interested in. So I felt like I knew a lot about George. Maybe not some of the nitty or grittier stuff, but I knew a lot about his career and his life, and like the general broad overstrokes, as well
Mhm.
as just like, who played frickin' Admiral Piet. Like, that was, like, huge to me as a
The
kid being
important
like,
details. Yeah.
yeah, who's this guy? What's this guy's deal?" Like, that was also big to me. So, I feel like out of the 3 of us, I'm the one who can, like, pull up those weird details
Mhm.
when it comes to him. It's a lot of like, "Well, George, of course you remember in the '80s when you were blah, 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 blah." Like, I'm the one who can be like, "Hey, Connor, remember this thing about George that you may
Yeah.
not know? Like, now you can talk about it because I mentioned it." Which is, we all have our things that we really like out of the 3 of us, and I think between the 3 of us, we form that perfect pie with our
Yep.
pie
Yep.
graph of stuff that we know?
It's like
So
poetry, it rhymes.
exactly,
The symbiotic circle.
exactly.
Everybody knows
Yeah,
something and adds and brings it
yes,
to the table.
it's
And it
true.
makes sense
Yeah,
that, you've dissected the beginning, the
yeah,
documentary about the
yeah,
Phantom
yeah,
Menace, like I have. That is probably the most Georgism memed
yeah,
thing in the
yeah.
history of George's existence, right?
Now just think about how much stuff there is on the cutting room floor where
Oh
we don't even
my
know
gosh.
about those Georgisms?
I know, I know. And that's what tears me apart and it keeps
Yeah.
me up at night. I need to know what else is out there.
We
This
just did a show in Portland, maybe like 3 months ago or something like that, with Lance Bangs, who's a documentary director, music video director, just like a man about town in that world.
Mhm.
He was the cameraman on Jackass.
Yeah. Okay.
Like, he's one of those guys who's just around
He's
here.
seen it
And
all.
they Yes, and they asked him to direct the beginning. And we didn't know that when I booked him on the show, and he, like, brought it up, like, 45 minutes into the show, and we were just like, "Stop! Stop, stop, stop talking. What are you talking about? They asked you to direct that. Like, you need to tell us everything about that now." And,
Oh my
so
gosh.
I love when things like that happen in our show. Is just like, we didn't plan on that. I didn't know that they asked him. It just happened to come up.
This is blowing my mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my
It was
gosh.
very exciting. Very
First
exciting.
off,
He
what a
talked
different world that would have been
I know.
if they had done this documentary recording.
Yeah,
What a
yeah, yeah.
different the beginning we would have gotten.
For sure, a totally different
Oh my
thing,
gosh.
and
But
he
also
was
what a
like,
wonderful like scoop that you had on your own on the
"Absolutely, I'd
show.
never heard it anywhere else," and he was just like, "Yeah, I just didn't wanna move away for, like, a year and have to go live in San Francisco and go edit this thing," you know? Which
Like,
I
you
get,
know,
you know?
a different time.
Everyone
A
Yeah,
different time. Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Well, and just continuing the George conversation of like the mannerisms and all that stuff. Like in your opinion, like why is George Lucas the best and perhaps the only figure within the media
Mhm.
that the format for this show works for?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question. It is weird because we have thought of like, what's an alternate version of this if George's team asked us to not do it, or
Yeah.
something happened to
Yeah.
George that we couldn't do the show anymore. Blah 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 blah. We've thought about it, and it is hard because he is the perfect mixture of extremely successful and influential in
Yeah.
the entertainment industry, has literally changed the way the entertainment industry works multiple times over, so
No
I don't
doubt.
need to tell you,
Absolutely.
like, um but also like he's a weirdo, you know And I say that with all the love in the world. Like, he's a real weirdo and, like, is interesting in so many different ways, has so many different tendrils that he's connected to, whether it's Pixar, whether it's, THX, whether it's whatever. Like, you can talk about so many things with this character.
Hmm. Hmm.
And he's interacted with so many people in the industry, whether it's, someone who was in a movie with him or someone who came into audition or someone who, like,
Right.
was in something he produced or whatever it was, that the possibilities for conversation are kind of endless. And you will, at least for us, we're having people who are at this point at like a certain level of fame,
Hmm.
and so many of them are like, "Oh yeah, I met you, George. Do you remember this?" Like, they'll bring that up in conversation. So he's a guy who's just like, he's been around for so long that he's met so many people, and people are interested in talking to him. And also, like, these movies mean so much to so many people, um that I think it's people want to even pretend like they have met him, you know?
Yeah,
We've had
exactly.
multiple people come on the show and afterwards emailed me and been like, "That was, like, weirdly cathartic."
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
talking to George was, like, very strange, whether that was someone who, like, auditioned for a part and didn't get it, or, like, had some axe to grind with George
Mm.
for some reason. Like, it is strange because Connor is able to play it in a way where, like, you will like George maybe more than you thought you could at the end of
Hmm.
doing the show.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know why it works. I really don't. I wish I did, but it does, And I don't know who the alternative would be if you were to do that show, because I don't think the Steven Spielberg talk show is nearly as interesting as the George Lucas talk show.
No, no, you're 100% right. Like, I was from, like, the first thing I did after watching it the first time through was I tried to create a list of who else this could work for.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think the first name, that, like, when you try to think about it, is Steven
yeah,
Spielberg, right?
sure.
But there just isn't the playful mannerisms to Spielberg's style
Yeah,
that you can tongue in cheekly, poke a little fun at, but also, imitate to the point where it's just a wonderful way of flattery, right?
totally,
It's a fine line, right? And I don't think with anybody else that you can really do that type of impersonation and it comes where that doesn't come across as mimicking or mocking or being any negative
totally.
way, because
Yeah,
everything that Connor does in his performance is totally genuine and from a place of love,
yeah.
and the ultimate form of flattery, in my opinion. Like, there is nothing about what he does that is mean or hateful or anything like that. It's truly from a place of goodwill in the heart.
Yeah, I mean, I also kind of think a big part of it is that he sort of just like disappeared when he sold that company, you know?
Yep.
It's whenever he shows up somewhere, it's like the cicadas came back out,
It
you
is.
know? Where
I
you're
saw
like,
him at
"Oh
the
my
Cannes
gosh,
Film Festival, and you're
yes,
like,
yes,
he's out. George
he's here.
interview.
There he is." Yeah, or you see some picture of him somewhere and it's like it's genuinely exciting, whereas like Spielberg will still do interviews pretty often and like is still
Regularly, yeah.
constantly making things. Um so just like find that guy where you're like, what is he up to? What is his deal? Because he's sort of an enigma. Is
Yeah.
I think also adds to the interestingness of it all.
And there's like a grumpiness to George that I just love
Oh,
about him.
absolutely.
Like
Yeah,
like there's the voice where Connor does a great impersonation of the George
yeah,
voice, which I think we all have our version of the George
yes,
voice.
yes,
Um, but my favorite picture of George is him just like sitting at a random mall somewhere, just
yeah,
eating spaghetti with his Diet Coke and looking so
yeah, yeah,
depressed.
yeah, yeah.
I'm like, I could frame that and put it on my wall over here, and that could
I know.
inspire me to get through a whole week of work for some reason. I don't know
Yes.
why.
Or you could put it in Photoshop and put, like, the paint filter over it and be like, "Is this a Rembrandt?" You know?
Yeah,
Like, it's a beautiful photo too at the same time, because it
absolutely.
it does, like, weirdly you can read into it so much where you're just like, "Why is he there? Why is he sad?
How did he
What is
get
he
here?
doing?" Yeah, how did he get here? What other stores did he go to in that mall, you know? Just like an interesting guy, and I don't know what it is that attracts him to us except for, like, and I think Connor talks about this in the doc, he was like one of the first like guys that you knew,
Hmm.
in when you're
Hmm.
watching movies and you're a kid, you're like George Lucas. That's one of the guys.
Yeah.
And I think it just like sticks in your craw this whole time, being like, how did this like kind of quiet weirdo make these movies that are beloved by so many people? Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I'm happy. I'm happy it worked out the way it did, and I'm happy
I
he
agree.
figured out that it would be funny. So
It's wonderful. And again, there's like some like mystical quality to this guy too. Like, even before he retired, this guy was still just like
Yeah.
not doing a whole ton of interviews. You would just see him
Yeah.
every now and then. He'd do like one promo video clip or something like that for his thing. And us as fans would like leech onto it, be like,
Of
"Oh, what
course.
does this mean? What's
Yeah.
George up to these days? What's he cooking?"
Yeah.
And then he goes off into San Marino County and all that
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. And just disappears for another 2 years. It's very interesting.
And he's like, "Here's my museum. Disney sold it off. I don't know what they're
Yeah.
doing. They're making
Yeah.
movies. I don't know."
Look, I can't wait for that. I cannot wait for that museum to open.
Me too. I'm gonna
If we do not get invited to the opening of that museum, I will be very upset.
First off, if
We
you don't get invited, and if you don't have
Yeah,
a show, because I'm sure they're gonna have some type
I
of
know.
like program space there. They're a
I mean,
museum. I
the
used to
dream.
work in museums. They have to.
Now,
If they
here's
don't send an invite, I mean, that's perfect programming for them right
I
there.
think we've talked about this publicly, but if not, you're about to get exclusive.
Mm.
We Connor made a music video of George
Ooh.
singing about his museum,
Oh
right?
my
And how
god.
excited he is for this museum. And word got to us that the song was playing on repeat over the speaker system while the museum was being built.
Oh my gosh.
So, we gotta get that invite, guys. Let us
You've
in, you know?
first off, you've made it. This is a
We've
whole
made it.
level of,
Yes.
there's Whoopi Goldberg fame and that level of success.
Yes.
But there's
Yes.
being in an academic setting, the museum.
Mhm.
You were
Mhm.
literally like, I believe that like the sound waves of music filters into everything that we do. And you
Yes.
were ingrained into the foundation of that building. It
Forever in
doesn't
those bricks.
you
Yeah.
every time whenever you step in that building, you're gonna go, you can like pat the wall, touch the wall, and be like,
Yeah.
we are within you.
Here within it'll be it's the Norman Rockwell paintings, it's the Oda Gunga maquettes, and it's our song about the Lucas Museum.
It's
Those are the
beautiful.
3 things
And I'm
that'll
telling you, I got
ever be there.
one more suggestion for the Lucas Museum that I think
Yeah.
George himself should do.
Yeah.
It is getting someone to just print off, perhaps,
Mhm.
someone print off a picture of him sitting at that table in the mall that we were talking about eating his spaghetti, and
Uh-huh.
then getting pink and yellow highlighters and then determining what's
Sure.
real and
What's
what's
real
not
and
real.
what's fake. Yeah. I think that's great. I
Final
think that's
edition.
great.
That's the last Lucas thing to add to the museum.
I mean, I would love it if we go to that museum and those giant boards that they were highlighting were up in that museum
That should
because
be
they
the thing
have
that
to
greets
exist.
you.
They're somewhere,
Yes,
you
they are
know?
in the archive that we talked
They have
about.
to be. Yeah.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. So back to the documentary. I want to talk about your role specifically within the show itself, the George Lucas
Yeah.
Talk Show. So kind of showcase within the documentary itself, your role has evolved a lot over the years. You went from the first show warm up comic
Mhm.
to kind of I'm now the producer, I suppose,
Yeah.
to I
Yeah.
am the producer and
Yeah.
talent booker. Now you're even an on air host alongside Connor and
Yeah.
Watto. Um, so I'm curious, how did you first meet Connor?
Yeah, I went to college in New York. I went to this place called Pace University, and my friend from high school named Brianna Sampson. I'm gonna fully name drop her right now
Okay.
because we gotta blame her. She was
She's the
going
problem here. She's the
yeah,
one.
she was also going to school in Manhattan. She was a year or 2 older than me, and, she said, "Oh, there's this theater, that I think you would like going to because I know you like comedy. I know you like, TV stuff." And it was
Mhm.
the UCB theater, which, this huge improv theater started by Amy Poehler and Matt Walsh from Veep and Ian Roberts and Matt Besser. And went with her, and then when I was leaving that first show, it was one of those things where I was like, "Oh, I guess this is just like a place that I go to now," you
Yeah.
know? And I go to a lot. That was like the thought in my brain where it's like, I guess I'm going here every week pretty much. So I
Mhm.
started going and I would go to a lot of different shows and I saw Chris Gethard, the comedian there a bunch.
Yep.
And it was that summer when his public access show was moving to or his UCB show was moving to New York City public access.
Mhm.
And I started going to that a bunch. I started working on that. And Connor was a recurring character actor on the show. He would come on and play himself, but like do bits on the show. And I was like,
Okay.
oh, that guy's super funny.
Yeah.
I want to go see everything that guy does. So whenever he would do a live show, I would go see it. And we got to be friends, just working on the Gethard show and doing things together. And when the Lucas show was happening, I was just going as a fan. And at the first show, like
Mhm.
20 minutes before, I either got a text or a call saying, "Hey, so and so who was doing the warm up who I can't remember who it was. I wonder if I could figure out who it was. Bailed. They're not going to do the warm up for
Gotcha.
the show. Um, I want you to do it. And I was not a performer. Like I had acted in high school, and I sort of got it out of my system, and I was like, I don't need to do that anymore. I didn't like doing it. I got nervous doing it. Like there was a
Sure.
lot of things where I was just like, I'm done. I did it. I'm happy. Good to go. I will exclusively do behind the scenes stuff now.
Fair enough.
Um,
Yeah.
because it's easier and more
And
fun
it's
for me.
important work to do. Someone
For
needs to
sure,
do
someone's gotta
it.
do it, and the thing that I liked was that, in that comedy world specifically and in, the entertainment industry, a lot of people will do something like that and then kind of secretly be, like, gunning for stage time,
Hmm.
where it's like, "I'm gonna produce this, but also, like, eventually you'll let me do stuff on the show," and that was,
Yeah.
like, truly not my thing, like, really didn't want it. So he's like, "I want you to do this warm up," and I was like, "Okay, fine, I'll do it." And I'd gone to enough like live, TV talk show tapings to know the general beats, the who's here from out of town, who likes Star Wars, blah blah blah
Yeah.
blah, like that kind of stuff. Um, and I did it, and it went fine, and the show was fun, and I started going to the rest of the shows and would sit in the front row and film them on my phone on my chest, which was great for the doc because we were able to like go back into all this archive footage
Yeah.
that we had, and
You
it
were
takes
the
up like
archive.
I was the archive. I was the archive. And but it was nice that we like had those hundreds of hours of shows or whatever it was to be
Hmm.
able to like go look at and put in there. Um, and eventually I would just like get there and help Connor set up and do all the boring menial tasks that like a friend would help you do to get ready for your show when it's just you pretty much setting the show up.
Right.
And then eventually, as I talk about in the doc, we were in the bar in the UCB in the East Village, and he was introducing me to someone, and he was like, "Oh, this is Patrick, my producer." And I was just like, "What are you talking about? Like, what do you mean you're I'm not your
Got promoted on the
producer."
spot.
Exactly. I was like, "I'm like 22. I'm not a child, but I'm like young. I'm not your producer. I don't have the skills for that." And he's like, "Oh no, no, no. You're my producer. You help me do all the stuff that I need." And then I sort of was like, okay, fine. Well, then I will, start to like book the show for you because you're like running out of friends you can ask. And, it's
True.
clearly exhausting you. And I had just started doing booking stuff. So it was like very early on in my
Hmm.
career, if, at that point doing that. And it was one of the things where, we could have anyone on the show. So it was like very fun to
Mm.
be able to be like, there's no rules for who we can have or can't have. It's truly just like who will show up,
Yeah. Who's going to show up today? That's right.
Yeah, truly, and it was, I think everyone did. I can't remember a time where someone didn't show up, even though it was a Friday at midnight show.
Oh,
Um, so I did that for years, and then COVID happened, and we changed over to the Twitch channel, and we were all locked up, and we were very locked up, the three of us. Like we were three of the ones who were
yeah.
like being extra cautious about things. And I think it was, I was just like, they needed help a little bit on the Twitch stream with like a clock because we are doing watch alongs and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And then it just became like, oh, I'm on this. And, I think we all realized that if we don't talk to someone else, we're going to go insane. So let's at
Yeah.
least like have this show where we can go on for a couple hours a week and like talk to another human being that's not our roommate or, whoever we live with. And I'm very happy that that happened. It changed my life in a lot of ways. Got me a lot more attention in other jobs, and I was able
Sure.
to be like, I did this thing for 500 hours during lockdown, and here it is, and you can look at it, and I'm
Yeah,
on it
my
too.
resume is now through the roof.
Exactly. It really helped out a lot. So I'm happy it happened, but it is like a weird circuitous path to get to the point that we've been at, for the last couple of years with that show.
Which is awesome. Like it, you were there from the beginning, and now you're
Yeah.
here as it's continuing to. It hasn't reached its apex yet. It's continuing to
I mean, we'll
go up
see.
on an
Who
on
knows?
an
Yeah.
uphill mountain, right? Like it's awesome.
Yeah.
So about the documentary, like one of my really, as you kind of can surmise, like I love behind the scenes details. I love the look into the creative process. It's why
Totally.
the beginning was such a formative thing of my childhood, right? I would
Yeah.
say no to hanging out with friends on a Friday night because I was like, no, I want to rewatch the beginning again. I'll see you guys on
So
Monday.
funny.
I
I
have
love
I have
that.
I have other things to do, is what I would say. But
I
really, I'm
love
running
that.
home to go put on the behind the scenes featurettes.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so, and this documentary really does a wonderful job at showing the creative process, the behind the scenes work that takes to put on the George Lucas talk show. So I was wondering if you can kind of speak to how an individual show kind of comes together. Because it seems like no idea is really ever too precious when it comes to the working between you, Griffin, and Connor, which, appears to be a very fresh and inspiring way to work.
Yeah, I mean, it's there is the scene in the documentary where we go over my house to sort of hash out how one of our bigger shows is going to like get put together.
Hmm.
And that was kind of one of the things in the doc. I'm going to use a word that's not necessarily the right word for it, but it was one of
Sure.
the things that was faked for the doc
Okay.
because it was rare. The conversation was not faked, but the circumstance was, because normally it would be just us texting, and that's obviously not a very
Oh, yeah.
visual thing, especially at that point. So it was not that exciting. So it was, we were like, we should just get together and chat about this because it was
Hmm.
up to that point our biggest show and the most ambitious thing that we were doing.
Right.
But a lot of it is just chatting about getting the date locked in first, where it's going to be, because now, pre-COVID it was every month, and then during COVID it was every week, and now that we're in this, nebulous post-COVID era, it's kind of whenever we want it to be, which is
Hmm.
kind of the perfect version of it,
It's
I
it's
think.
yeah, I would say, yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to like, oh no, it's every week. I need to get at least two guests, probably four
Yeah.
guests together for this show.
You're not forced an arbitrary deadline.
No, exactly, which is great. So it's us just like getting the venue locked in, getting the guests locked in, which are usually stuff that I do, but sometimes if, Griffin or Connor have a friend that they want to get on the show,
Hmm.
they'll take care of that and then just pass it on to me. And then, deciding if there's anything big we want to do at our last show, like Griffin did a song as Watto. There's like a lot of stuff that will come up sometimes last minute. And it's just, we try not to plan too much about it. We don't usually talk about what we're
Hmm.
going to talk about beforehand, just because I think it's more fun to just like
I agree.
either pop
Yeah.
it on the other two as a surprise. You'll get fresher reactions and you get more
100%.
interesting conversation. But sometimes if someone has brought up something that would be funny in the show, one of us will like tee up the other one to do it because we know that
Hmm.
it'll be good. But there's not really a lot of prep beyond just like be here at this time and this is who's going to be here.
Yeah. Yeah.
We used to do a lot of like video stuff, and Connor would like edit, something that the guest was in alongside a Star Wars thing or alongside an American Graffiti thing, just to be like, here are the parallels between the Daily Show and THX 138 or whatever it was, you
Brilliant.
know? But then once the show became something that goes on YouTube, you can't really do that without it
Hmm.
getting flagged and, taken down for copyright stuff.
That's true.
So we've sort of pulled back on stuff like that, and it just becomes more of a, talk show itself. But yeah, not much prep beyond that. Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think of other stuff that we would do. It's mostly just like talking to each other, making sure we're all good, and making sure that everyone is happy and ready to go and all that.
Well,
Just getting
I
them on
love
stage. That's the biggest part.
get on
As soon as
stage. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, as soon
Hit
as everyone
record.
gets
Turn the
there
mics
and
on.
yes. As soon as everyone is in the building, I can relax because I'm like, okay,
Oh,
well, it's not going to go wrong at this point. Like everyone is here,
it's
and
out of
it's
my hands.
rare.
Yeah.
It's out of my hands, and this sounds backpatty, but I don't mean it to. Like it's rare that we have a bad show,
Hmm.
you know. Especially at this point, we've done it so many times. We've done it probably, I don't know, like 200 times, something like that.
Yeah.
So it's we know what we're doing at this point, which is
Well, you
great.
create a comedic rhythm and a
Yeah,
cadence and language between each other,
yeah.
which you grow over time. And at a certain point, you're like, I know these people better than some of my own family members, right? Like,
Totally, absolutely. I mean, even like, Griffin and Watto are two different people to me,
yeah.
which is weird. It's weird, but like if you think of the amount of time that I've talked to Watto, it is so much more than the amount of time that I've talked to Griffin, which
Yeah.
is fascinating.
Oh my gosh.
Uh so I have a great rapport with Watto and with George, and I think that that is like a weird skill that I have. And that we all have, like Connor's got it with Watto and Griffin's got it with George, and it's very strange to consider them to be two different people. But there are sometimes where I'll be like telling Griffin a story that I forgot that I've told to Watto. You know what I mean? And I
Yep.
assume that he does not know it.
Look, I think this is brilliant that you bring this up because
Mhm.
in tying it all to George, right? I
Yeah.
still believe that Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader are two separate people.
Sure.
So
Sure. I
when
get
you're
it.
explaining this to me, I totally understand
You
what you're saying.
understand. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's very
This is
weird.
awesome. This is awesome.
Very weird.
And I love and it just you say like there's such an art to improvisation, right? That I think you kind of know the general structure of what you guys are doing,
Yeah.
but then when you get there, you turn the lights on, you surprise each other, right? You never know what the
Yeah.
guests are going to say. That's where the magic happens, right?
Yeah,
And it's
for sure.
beautiful. Like you can set up a bit, maybe tell somebody, but it's got to play out, right? And then
Yeah.
it, everyone, as far as I can tell from the documentary, from the clips that I watched on YouTube and
Mhm.
Twitch, everyone gives 110%, which is
Mhm.
phenomenal.
Yeah, it's fun, and I think that once you get the guests to agree to be there, they've bought into that reality,
Yeah,
and that's
yeah.
kind of the most important part of the show. We've had a not even a handful, we've had probably 3 people over the years
Hmm.
who have refused to buy into that reality, and
Really?
it may yeah, yeah. You can
How do
go
you
watch
not?
our first London show from last year, and
Oh, okay.
it's an interesting one with a cast member from the prequels.
Really? Is this around
Yeah,
Celebration?
this was around Celebration. Yeah, we were there for
Ooh,
Celebration.
okay,
Yeah, yeah,
okay. I'll have to dig that
yeah.
one up.
Yeah, and once they buy into that reality, it's gonna go fine. But if they're out there saying, "My name's Jerome Blake, and I played 5 roles in The Phantom Menace, and
Mhm.
you're not George Lucas," the audience is not gonna be on their side.
That and, there's some consequences to
There's some
that.
consequence to that, and, like, if you get booed by the audience, that's on you, my
That's
man.
on you. You chose
They're
not to buy into this.
they're
You
all
set yourself
here
up for failure.
Yes, they're here to see Watto and George.
Yep.
They're excited to see that, and if you're saying, "You don't remember directing me on set because you're not George Lucas," like,
Mhm.
that's not gonna win anyone over. So I think that that's what we tell people when we first start is like, "Look, you can do what you want, but here's the thing, you will come off looking bad if you don't lean into it." So,
Wow, wow. That's so interesting because, like, I feel like the way that the show is set up and just, like, clearly Connor does a transformation into this role, like,
uh-huh.
that's
Uh-huh.
one of, like, the best and also heartbreaking scenes of the documentary, seeing him actually transform into George and just, like, the
Yeah,
pain that
yeah.
it's not like it's a quick transformation like that without, like, quick and seamless, right?
No,
He has to go take a journey.
it's like when David Naughton is turning into the werewolf in American Werewolf in
Yeah,
London. It's very
exactly.
similar. You see
Same
his
deal.
back arching and his fingers growing longer, and he has to
It's
hairspray
like he's coughing
his
his
hair
lungs
gray.
out.
Yeah, yeah. That's probably the hardest part, I think, for him is just, like, getting his hair gray every show, and especially when he was doing it week to week, it was like he had to buy a lot of hairspray and, like,
A
had to, like,
lot.
kind of inhale a lot of hairspray.
Oh, yeah. Woo.
Uh, and it was, fascinating to just, like, see how that, degrades the human spirit.
It does, but, once you undertake that, like, and seeing Griffin, of course, turn into
Yeah,
Watto,
yeah, yeah,
you give your like, is if I were a person that's up there on the audience, not on the audience, but, being interviewed,
yeah.
that would just give my brain the permission to have fun here and
I
just,
think
like,
so.
give
Yeah.
into give into the shtick, right?
Yeah,
We're here. Hey, George. Hey,
and
Watto.
so many people do, it makes me laugh every time when we have someone very famous on the show and they go, like, "Oh, yeah, no, Watto, you're definitely right about that." Like, anytime someone
Yeah.
very famous has to say the word Watto, it makes me
Oh,
laugh. And anytime someone who knows George in real life has to be like, "Well, George, of course you remember when we blah blah
yeah,
blah blah
remember when we
blah."
had lunch and did
Yes.
that?
It makes me laugh so much. And that's truly like the most joy that I get from that show is like just hearing people say their names out loud.
I
And
love
I
it.
love it. Yeah.
That is so cool. That is so cool. So over the years, you've seen the talk show evolve from the UCB days to live convention programs to the
Mhm.
Twitch shows, and now even this we talk this middle hybrid between
Yeah.
live shows across the globe and the Twitch shows continuously. To what do you attribute the long term success of the George Lucas talk show then? And how do you think the production will continue to grow as we move into the future?
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that has helped it a lot is that it does keep evolving and it keeps changing. And, the people who were there a lot in the documentary in 2019 or 2018, whenever you're watching that
Yeah.
footage, are not necessarily still coming to the show or watching the live
Sure.
streams. Like, it's a new group of people because you get people from Iowa and you get people from Canada and from
Hmm.
Berlin and, all over the place, like, now watching the show when they couldn't do that when it was just a New York stage show. So I think that that has helped keep it alive, is just, like, bringing in that fresh blood every couple of years of, like, here's a new way to experience this show.
Absolutely.
And there are people who are still there from the beginning, but it's definitely like it's new blood and it's new people. And I think that, being able to like get cool people on that show is such a indicator of like, if you've never seen it and you hear that Seth Meyers is on or whatever, it's sort of like a seal of approval,
Yeah.
where you're like, well, it has to be good if he's doing it. It
Hmm.
has to be at least interesting if he's doing it. And I think that has helped a lot, just when we have someone interesting and cool on, you see the numbers spike, of course, because
Yeah.
it's
They
the
bring a whole
famous
separate
person.
audience to it.
Totally. And that's the goal. The goal is to like bring in new people, and the show is obviously not for everybody. Like, it's a very
Sure.
weird show and it's a very niche specific show, but at the same time, like, you don't have to be a Star Wars fan to like it, and you
No.
don't have to know anything about Star Wars to like it. And I think that is also important, and once you as a viewer realize that, I think you can fully get immersed in the show.
Yeah. You just need to like having a good time and
Yeah.
letting yourself just be immersed in something.
Yeah, and letting yourself, like, have a silly couple hours, because that's what it's gonna be. Like, it's gonna be silly, and it's gonna be unlike anything else you've seen, and just, like, given to your inner child, and that's kind of what it is. Like, I've always said that, like, I don't really care if the audience is having a good time when
Hmm.
we're up there. I care if we're having a good time, because I know if we're having a good time, like, at least 4 other people are
Yep.
having a good time watching it, and that's all that matters to me. Which is
That's
why the
right.
live streams were fun, because we would do, like, 12-hour shows or whatever, and I'm like, if we're still having fun, some people are still having fun, and that's great, you
Yep.
know?
Someone's tuning in.
Yeah, we're not there to play to the masses, you know? So,
Exactly, exactly. Make the
yeah.
show that you wanna watch first, and then
Yeah,
other people will join along the ride because if they see that other people are having fun and
yeah,
enjoying themselves, then that energy is infectious,
yeah, I love it.
which
It's
which
it's the
is
best kind of energy, I think.
which is really awesome too, and I love the live like, the anytime that I see the tickets go on sale for a live show, where there be, like, a celebration or something like
Mhm.
they're gone super
Yeah,
fast. Those tickets
yeah,
go like that, like,
yeah,
it is almost, like, mythical when a new show
I
gets
know.
announced,
I
and,
mean,
like,
people
people
love
are rushing for those tickets right away,
yeah. And
and it's
people
awesome.
love just, like, being in a room with other people who likes the same things, like, I
Yeah.
had never gone to a celebration until Anaheim in 2022, is that when that was?
22. Yep, yep, I was
Yeah,
there too, so yeah, it was my first
yeah.
as well.
Yeah, so I went to Anaheim and I went to London, in 23, and it was, that first one, especially the Anaheim one, was, like, truly, like, life-changing, and just, like,
Yeah.
the one of the most fun weekends I've ever had, and just, like, getting to see all
Here,
these
here.
people who were, like, there to have fun and not, I didn't really hear a negative thing all weekend, which was something that I love.
No, you will not.
And it is one of those things where you wonder, where you're like, are the people who are annoying online here and just being quiet, or do they stay home, or are they all talk online and then once you get to be in person, they shut up,
Yeah.
And regardless, it doesn't matter, because it was not a negative experience in any way. And I had such a good time, and I hope to go to Tokyo. I'm trying to figure out if I'm going to go to Tokyo, but we'll see.
Hey, you never know. George
Yeah,
Lucas Talk Show in Tokyo.
I would love it. I would love it.
I know they had or they experimented with or attempted to do what, the George Lucas Mega Show or something in the
Oh,
90s.
yes, yes, yes.
That'd be a perfect tie-in.
Man, can you imagine? If we did our own Ice Capades show or whatever that thing was, that would be great. I'm in.
The ultimate variety hour. Could you imagine Connor on just some, like, ice skates, just, like, trying to skate around?
Yes, I
Oh,
can. Yes, I can exactly see that in my
bring it
face.
back, baby. I'm manifesting it. I hope this
I'm
happens. Go
ready.
to Tokyo. Let's see it. Let's see it on unfold in front of our eyes.
I can't wait. I can't wait.
Wonderful, wonderful. So this is my last question about the documentary itself, and I hope that everyone again goes and checks it out for themselves. Again, it's available now on video on demand. You can rent it or buy it from imgeorgelucas.com. That's I am, not IAM, but I am georgelucas.com. So, Patrick, what do you hope are like the takeaways that someone will have after watching this documentary?
I think the thing that we wanted when we made this documentary, was that, Connor and I and Griffin to a lesser extent because he grew up in New York City.
Hmm.
Connor grew up in Missouri. I grew up in Northern Connecticut,
Right.
almost in Massachusetts. And when we were growing up, we would hear about these either live shows or events or whatever that were happening in
Hmm.
Los Angeles or New York, and would be like, man, I wish I could see that. It really stinks that that was like a
Yeah.
one time only thing that is gone forever. And pre-COVID, the original reason for making this documentary was so that we could show people what this thing was that we've been working on. Now it's different, obviously, because so much of it is online and so much of it
True.
you can see
True.
now. But at that point, it was like, if you live in Montana or you live, in Mexico or whatever, you're not going to be able to see this show in 2019. You're not going to know really much about it besides the stuff that you see on social media.
Hmm.
And we wanted people to be able to know what it was like to make a comedy show or a live show in a big city without anyone who was super famous,
Yeah.
being the driving force behind the show. Because you can do a live show, and if it's, I'm just gonna say a name, if it's Ellen DeGeneres hosting the show, like, people are gonna show up, people are gonna watch it like on TV. But if the George Lucas Talk Show was on TV in 2019, no one would know who any of us were, and it's a lot harder to get people to come out. So I
Sure.
think that, it was important for us to be like, this is kind of the calling card for the show. If you want
Hmm.
to know what it is, here's 90 minutes of it distilled into a movie.
Right.
And I think that's what I want people to take away from, is just like seeing what goes into making a show like that, and what goes
Yeah.
into like a live, either stand up or improv or whatever the heck this show is, show, because it's more work than you think it would be, and it's stressful, but it's also super fun to put on a show with your friends. And I think the camaraderie of the three of us, like, putting that thing together, is like cool to watch happen.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that as someone who's in it. Like, I'm happy that it exists, because also the world is so different from when we shot that it's like nice to be able to look back. I
True.
live in LA now. I lived in New York then, and I can like watch them be like, that's my apartment. They're in my apartment. I remember being there. I remember doing this thing.
Hmm.
And life is so different at this point that it's nice to have this little time capsule,
Yeah.
of those years.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. And I will say again, the documentary rocks and the George Lucas Talk Show rocks. It believes in itself, which is the most important thing at the end of the day. Both do, the documentary and the show itself. And I attribute
Never
that to,
heard that phrase before, and that's a really interesting phrase. I really like that phrase.
yeah. No,
That's
feel free to
great.
use it whenever you want.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's good. I like that.
It's how like it's the first thing that came out of my mouth after watching the doc. I was like,
That's amazing.
this is a show that everyone is putting in every effort that they can into it. They understand the shtick, the bit,
Mhm.
and it showcases the result. You put it through the formula of it all. It comes out on the other end, and it's a fun, adventurous way to just geek out about this world that George Lucas created, or the world that we're living in right now. Because
Yeah.
frankly, we're living in a George Lucas world, if you ask me.
Uh-huh.
you
Uh-huh.
can't do just about anything in this world without
Yeah.
coming across
Some
something that
connection.
George Lucas had some way in taking part of. Like,
Yeah, that's true.
geez, we're streaming, right? Like
Yeah.
digital, anything digital.
So many things. I know. I know.
It's amazing, and just to celebrate George in the way that your show does is awesome, and I hope that continues for many more years in the future, as long as everyone's willing and having fun doing it and all that stuff.
Thank you.
So thank
Thank you.
you for that. And I do have one more question for you before we kind
Yeah.
of close out here, and this is about a little film that is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year, that being
Sure.
Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace.
Yes,
So
yes, yes.
Patrick, you did some recent work lately called
Yeah.
something, the Naboo movie, it's called,
Yeah.
which was a table read that you produced of The Phantom Menace in celebration of its 25th anniversary. So, I want to start with this first question here, and I got
Mhm.
another follow-up one here about this. So after all these years,
Mhm.
what were your feelings like to start with The Phantom Menace when you first saw it? And then
Mhm.
have your feelings and attitudes about the movie perhaps changed over the last 25 years? What has been your evolution with the movie?
Yeah, I mean, I was 7 when that movie came out, which is kind of the
Love it.
perfect age for
You were
that
the
movie.
right age.
I
Yeah.
was the perfect age. I was all in. I had all the toys, had all the everything, like was fully on board. And unfortunately, I hate to tell you all, I'm still on board, baby. I'm still all in. I love
Hey,
it.
hey. Oh, you
Hey,
can't
hey,
even see my shirt. There we go.
oh my god, that's amazing. Wearing an episode 1 shirt. I think it's the best prequel. I think it's so fun. I think it is so tactile in a way that people don't give it credit for, that a lot of it
Yes.
is real.
Oh my
And a lot
gosh,
of
yeah.
people will be like, no, it's all CG. And you're like, nah, man, most of that's models and stuff like that, you know? Um, I can understand why people do not like it, but I don't acknowledge their opinions.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, yeah,
I love it. I
yeah.
love it. That look, I was 4 when the movie came out, so
Amazing.
again, same age, like
Yeah,
those
yeah,
Jar Jar jokes stuck with
yeah,
me, and
yeah,
they still stick with me today too. And as I've gotten older with it, I just find more and more about it that I love every time. Like,
yeah,
as I get older, I'm like, "Oh, Qui-Gon's the man."
yeah. Mm-hmm.
I keep getting
Mm-hmm.
older and I keep going, "Man, Qui-Gon's still the man," and he gets more the man, if that's even a way to phrase it,
Yeah,
as time goes on. So I'm glad
yeah.
that you had a great liking of the movie to start with. It's only continued to stay that way as life has gone on. So it's now we're at this table read for
Yeah.
the 25th anniversary, and you had a massive cast, including Tony Hale, Christina Ariel, and one of
Yeah.
my personal heroes, Matt Gorley,
Oh,
as
yeah.
Nude Gunray,
Uh-huh.
and many other characters. So,
Yeah.
what did it take to wrangle such an incredible cast of people together for this momentous occasion?
Yeah, I mean, the guys, I did it with the guys from Star Wars Minute, the podcast, Pete and
Yeah.
Alex,
Okay.
and they came to me with this idea that they had been wanting to do for a while, and, we had been on their show a few times, so we got to know them a little bit over the years, and they just felt like I would be able to help them out with casting because that's, like, what it's my main gig is casting and
Hmm.
talent booking and stuff like that. And I knew most of the people who ended up being in it, almost everyone. There was a hint, like I had never worked with Lorraine Newman, who played
Okay.
Shmi,
Yeah.
original SNL cast member Lorraine Newman,
Sure.
played Shmi Skywalker and TC-14. And I didn't know Tawny Newsome, who played Padme.
Hmm.
But I think basically everyone else I knew. Um, and it was just, I don't know, it's a weird math puzzle almost when you look at the characters and look at how we're going to break them down based on who doesn't interact with each other in scenes because you don't want someone to have to like read lines back and forth to themselves. Being
Yeah.
like, who is the person that I either know or like or trust, to handle the Gragra, but also, this is just I'm naming
Yeah.
random ones. Gragra, but also Masameda, but
Hmm.
also Oppo Rensisis. Like just
Yes.
random characters. Who are the person that could embody all of these characters?
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's just like a weird gut feeling on like, I don't know, this person seems like they could do it and it would be different and fun. We had Eric Bauza, who does all of the Looney Tunes, not all of, but he
Hmm.
does a lot of the Looney Tunes voices
Yeah.
now. And he played Jar Jar as if it was Daffy Duck at the table reading, doing Jar
Wonderful.
Jar.
Yeah.
And it's genuinely amazing. It's like
It,
so funny and so unexpected, but it also like reinforces that thing where you're like, oh, Jar Jar's a Looney Tune. Like
yeah.
George likes Looney Tunes and likes old cartoons, and that's what this character
That,
is,
that
you
was the
know?
slapstick humor he was going for.
Yes, and
Exactly.
and hearing it done in that voice, you're like, I mean, this works. There was a lot of lines in that movie that I can admit, like, they don't necessarily work in that movie, whether it's the direction, whether it was the
Sure.
actor involved, whatever. But you hear it and you're like, you probably could have done a different reading on that and it would have been better. And
Yeah.
there's multiple times in this version where you hear someone say something and you're like, wow, that line hits in a much different way when you say it like this versus when so and so said it.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's one of the things I'm the most proud of. I think it's very funny, and I think it's, and I could say that because I only was one of the narrators. Like I was not reading it. But I think it's very funny, and I think that if you like Star Wars and you like the prequels, you will like this because it's not mocking it. And that was important to me when we were doing it.
Yeah.
I told everyone before, like, this movie gets a lot of guff, I think unfairly, and I don't want it to turn into a 3-hour this sucks fest.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want this to be a fun celebration of this movie, and I think they all stuck to that, and I think everyone had a really good time, and you can tell that by watching it. So, I hope people check it out. You can watch it at naboomovie.com. It'll redirect you to the YouTube, and it's up there for free, so anyone can watch it.
Yeah. I can, tell you as a fan of the prequels and the Phantom Menace specifically, the brief was met, right?
Yeah,
It is
yeah,
is from a place of love,
yeah,
and it is celebrating
yeah,
this movie that changed cinema in a way, and again in another
for
way too.
sure.
Like, this is the world doesn't exist today as it does if the Phantom Menace doesn't come out for a variety of reasons.
And look, I'll
Um,
say this, I'm working on there's a lot more movies in that saga, so currently working on
ooh,
something else that will be announced pretty soon.
ooh, I love
Yeah,
the sound of this. I love the
yeah,
sound of this. I know that the tickets again
uh-huh.
went super fast
They
too.
did. They did go very fast. They sold out very quickly, which was
I was
great.
like, holy
But
cow,
also
I can't even think about if I want to go or
I know.
not.
Well, I'll let you know the date of the next one, and you can you
Okay,
can go to that one.
very good.
But the nice thing about it, about Dynasty Typewriter, the theater we did it at, is that they also have a 5 or 6 camera live stream setup.
Yeah,
And they have a guy editing, like live editing the shots backstage. So people are able to watch it from literally anywhere in the world, which was rad.
beautiful.
And it also gave me the opportunity. The version that's on YouTube now is kind of the perfect version. I went through and I re-edited it with all the different cameras, and it's kind of
Yeah,
the ideal version of it, so you don't miss anything, which
that's
is great.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to hear that there's, wink,
We'll
wink,
see.
more on
We'll
the
see.
way.
Wink, 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 wink.
I watched a good amount of it
Yeah.
in preparation for this show, and as soon as I saw Matt Gorley come to the stand
Uh
with
huh.
his notebook and started reading for Newt Gunray
Yes.
in the voice of Southern Lawyer Gentleman from his wonderful podcast with Gorley and Russ, which is
Yes.
my all-time favorite podcast.
Yeah, it's great.
Uh, that voice alone has like saved me during the pandemic. I
Yeah,
can't tell you how. Like, it is something that got me through a lot of hard times to just listen to that voice and to hear him
it's so
construct
good.
Nude Gunray in the same
But it
dictation and
also,
tone.
you hear that and you're like, man, this kind of works too in
I'm
like an
like, this is
interesting
brilliant.
way. Yeah.
I can't unhear it now. Every
Yes.
time I see the Phantom Menace, I'm just gonna think of that.
Yeah. I love it. I love
If
it.
I see a Nemoidian in the
Uh-huh.
Acolyte talk again, I might think about that voice and like,
Good.
oh,
Good.
It's Matt Gorley.
Yeah.
That's who's doing the
Yeah.
voice behind the scenes. But it's wonderful. It's wonderful. So, congratulations, Patrick, on this wonderful endeavor. I know it was a
Thank
lot
you.
of work behind the scenes and all that to get this all together.
Yeah.
And of course, your continued work on the George Lucas Talk Show. And congratulations on the documentary being out now and it being on video on demand. And thank you for being on this podcast today and
Yeah.
for
Thank you
chatting
for having
about
me.
the show and the behind the scenes work and just kind of just being a good member of the Star Wars community, which I know
Of
there's,
course.
we try to find the good ones on the show and have good
Yes.
chats with them about this stuff. And you're one of them. So thank you
And
so
that
much
is
for
and
that.
that's why we, connected, because we knew you were trying to find the good people in the community, and that's the goal. Because there's
Oh,
too
I
many
love it.
people that are not, and it's very
Yes.
frustrating sometimes to be a fan. So, thank you also for trying to stay in that ideal spot.
Well, you are most welcome, my friend. And if the folks want to chat with you or find ways to connect with you online, how can they do so?
Yeah, they can. You can. Well, let's see. Let's start at the beginning. You can watch the doc. I'm GeorgeLucas.com. You can watch the Naboo movie. NabooMovie.com. You can go on Instagram. I'm at Cotnoir, Cotnoir. On Twitter or X or whatever it is this week, it's Patrick Cotnoir. PatrickCotnoir.com is my website. It's got everything that I've pretty much ever worked on there. And yeah, those are the big guys. I don't know. I'm on like Blue Sky or whatever, but I'm there. You can find me if you want.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. So everyone, go check out the George Lucas Talk Show, or
Oh
not.
yeah,
Well,
and
go
those are
check out the
all and
George
those
Lucas
are all
Talk Show
on
too.
yes,
Those
and
are
those are
online.
all
Yes,
on YouTube. You can go to YouTube, and I recommend finding a guest that you like and having that be your first episode, because it's easier to
yeah,
get into it if you like someone already. So
absolutely, absolutely. What a great starting point for that. And then go check out all the other episodes, of course,
yeah,
too, that are out there and available. And do the 12-hour dive and the 6-hour deep
I
dives
love
and
it.
all
I
that.
love it.
So, and of course, we will have links in the episode description here for the I'm George Lucas, the Connor Ratliff story, the documentary, where you can get that on video on demand right now, whether buying or renting it. And of course, we'll have a link for the Naboo movie as well, so you can check that out.
Thank you.
And folks, we'll be back, of course, on Sunday with our continuing Acolyte coverage for episode 5. Who knows what that's going to be about, but we'll find
Hey,
out when it gets
look,
to that point.
I'm hearing 5's a banger. I hear
Oh,
5's a barn burner. So get ready.
ooh. I'm
Get
on
ready.
episode. I'm just thinking about episode titles now, man. I'm like, is it called
Sure.
Night? Are we day and
Sure.
night? Are we
Yeah,
going
yeah,
back
yeah.
in time? Who knows? So
Yeah.
I'm all for it. I'm all for
I'm
it. I heard
ready.
it was a 2-parter. They really split up episodes 4 and 5 and just said,
Sure.
all right, we're going to do this. So maybe it's a full story with 5 there. And
I'm
I'm
ready.
hoping my mind is blown. I'm ready for it.
Yes.
I'm ready for
Yes.
it.
I'm sure it will
I
be.
hope all the listeners at home are ready for it too. So
Yes.
until then, we'll be back with another episode in your podcast feeds. But again, until then, may the force be with you. Take care.